take the physical copy of the book and put it on the screen. That would be so nice to see all of them. And the others also can put their cameras on. It's such a pleasure to see all your friends' book on the screen. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to introduce Nivedita. Now, uh, she doesn't need that kind of introduction yet. I will take that opportunity. That Nivedita is a full-time poet and author originally from Kolkata, West Bengal. And she's a gold medalist in BA English from SNDT University in Mumbai and a silver medalist in MA English from Stella Maris College, Madras University. She has also very recently completed her MA in psychology, and as a creative content developer, she has previously freelanced for global brands such as Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Indianica, was formerly known as Britannica, BBC, and more. She's also a screenwriter and has worked for several years in television and film industry for Mumbai and Kolkata, with some of the biggest brands such as Star TV, Sri Venkatesh Films, and more. Nivedita's poetry has always been extensively featured in several international journals and magazines. As a poet, she has represented the Indian voice at the International Beat Poetry Festival, West Virginia chapter in 2016. She has now brought her own poetry collection, Larkspur Lane, Branch Labyrinths of the Mind, which she calls her firstborn. And it is the launch of this firstborn that we all are here for. And now I would like Nivedita to share her journey as a poetry and her personal experience. Nivedita.
Thank you so much, Namita. Thank you so much for doing this. And thank you everyone who's present here. I just want to greet everybody I am based out of Mathura, so greetings from Mathura to Kolkata, Delhi, Chennai, Coimbatore, Bolpur, Tagore's own land. Then we have, I think, one sec, Bangalore, we have Chennai. Susan ma'am has joined us a little later when we were discussing. Susan ma'am was my HOD in my Stella Maris days, and lovely to have you, ma'am, here. We have New York, we have Arizona, we have Toronto. So thank you so much. If I've missed anybody, I am like kind of a bit nervous, so please excuse me. Uh, Thank you for joining and sharing about my poetic journey. Somebody was recently asking me, when did you start writing? To be honest, I don't remember. It was probably as early as age 8, and I used to be a Bollywood buff, so I started pretending that I'm a screenwriter and started writing all those trashiest storylines and those cheesiest songs, Hindi songs and all. So that's how my writing tryst with writing began. Then for quite a few years, I was not writing. And then again, the entire thing came back when I was doing my graduation. And then from my MA years, post-graduation years, it just kind of took over me full-fledged. So that's been my poetic journey. Having shared that, I really want to share one aspect of my poetry writing, and which is also there in the epigraph of the book. I honestly never claim to write any poetry. I do not write poetry. It's 90% of the time, and beyond the cliche, it's not a lip service. Really, I don't write poetry. Poetry writes through me, because 90% of the time, I am probably not even aware of the subtext or what am I writing. Like many a times when I'm reading my own poem after it's been written, I'm like, oh my God, did I just write that? So I sincerely believe that poetry herself is a individual. She is an entity I've seen in action, and I have tremendous awe and reverence for this entity called poetry. She writes through me. I do not claim to have control over her. I do not claim to have written anything. She's the one who writes through me. So that's been there. I will not call it a writing in a trance, because that again probably sounds like a spiritual mumbo jumbo. But yeah, a very automatic, a very taken over, and then when the whole overflow happens. So yes, my absolute reverence to this entity called poetry. Um, about the book, yeah. So I started writing full-fledged from 2006 when I was doing my MA in Stella Maris, and thereon I have continued writing poetry. So I always wanted to get everything that I have written under one umbrella, and for many years this was not happening. Thankfully, it clicked this year, and so it's all those poems that I've written from 2006 till recently, like maybe 2021. So I remember when I was having a word initially with Amit, a very good friend and fellow poet, and he was joking. Like we both were joking about, he said, "Why don't you name this book instead of Larkspur Lane? Just name it as, collected poems from the year so and so to so and so." So we had a hearty laugh. But yes, finally it became a hefty firstborn with more than 220 plus poems, and the book is divided into 7 categories. So one second, let me just yeah, so it has 7 categories of poem: on life and the divine, on all things vaguely resembling love, on calculated eternity, on poetry and performance, which is again a meta poetry kind of a section, on mind and its war zone. So those of you all know me personally know that I am also an active mental health activist, having been a survivor myself. So I wanted to put in those mental health also there. So that's that section there. On memory and decadence, again a very favorite section for me, which goes back to nostalgia and childhood memories and stuff. And the last being on being stranded. That's just a 2 poem long section, which is a sneak peek into the next one, which is probably in the pipeline. So yeah, so that's the book subdivided. I divided into these categories, and yeah, that's about it. So I'm really, really glad that we are launching this firstborn of mine. Okay, yeah, that's about it. Namita, over to you.
Thank you. Now I will ask the panelists to please start the discussion. And our first panelist is Ananya. And I would like to introduce her. She's Ananya Chatterjee. She is a software professional working for Oracle India Private Limited, working a gold medalist in computer science, wow, and a bilingual poet. She's the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Poet and His Valentine, a collection of verses. The Blind Man's Rainbow and Unbuilding Walls are her other books. Ananya also worked as a translator for the poems by actor and poet Soumitra Chatterjee, published in the book forms Within. She has translated the works of eminent artist Jogin Chaudhary and as well as is currently translating Anuj Dhar and Chandrachud Ghosh Kondram Subhash Bose's life after death. She lives in Kolkata with her family. Ananya, please.
Thanks, Namita. Um, so it's a strange day for me to be finally doing this, which something that I have discussed for so many days with Nivedita, and when she invited me to be a panelist, because I'm not unlike many people here. I am not a professional poet, though I don't even understand what that term means, professional poet. I mean, I'm not a full-time poet. But as Nivedita said, poetry is a condition that you're born with. It is something, it's almost like a malady that, or a condition that you cannot escape from. It doesn't matter whether you write it or you don't. It's something that stays in you. And this is one aspect in which I resonate with Nivedita's poetry. All her poems, one can sense from the kind of writings that she has produced, that they are effortless. They are not born out of active thinking process. They are born out of the innermost feelings that she could not hold back, and something had to get written, and then they have of course been refined, that any poet would do in order to make them present them better. But the gist of it, or the inner, the feelings that are grasped, that are present in these poems, they are not well thought out, or they are not, she's not faking it, to be honest. So that is the reason why we can grasp it so well, or any reader will be able to resonate with her lines, with her words, because it is something that is effortless. So I think what I would like to touch upon, okay, before I go there, I think one thing that I found really interesting in Nivedita's book is that, I think perhaps this is the only book of poetry in the world which has a to be continued in the end. You see that in horror stories, you see that in mystery novels, but you don't see that with poetry, and which makes it so much, I really like that concept, that it never ends, because poetry doesn't end. Even a poem never ends, because it begins in the
Absolutely.
poet's words. It begins in the poet's words and it ends in the reader's mind. So poetry can never end in that way. So having said that, I think I would like to talk about what I found very interesting is that the kind of topics that she has chosen to be presented in this book, uh, many of them are apparently very everyday subjects. For example, there's a poem called Oranges, which is a very everyday topic. It's I mean, people will not think of this title Oranges and associate it with poetry, right away. But the lines, and when you read through that poem, the profoundness that you gather out of it, the feeling that it leaves you with, that is something to be considered. And this is not just with one poem. This pattern has repeated itself throughout this book, which is what I found very interesting, and I thought I would like to highlight upon that. So as an example, I think I would read this poem, Almond Delight. And uh, okay, let me first read the poem for everyone to understand. Is Nivedita there? I don't see her. Nami, is she there?
Yes, she is there. Just give me a minute.
Okay. I didn't see her in the gallery view, so thought I'll wait.
Let me, I think she's not there. Just let me check with her if she's a network is there. Give me a minute.
Okay, sure. Yeah, she's back, I think.
She's back.
Okay,
Good God.
cool. Hey, Nivedita, I didn't want to start without you, so I was waiting.
I just want to say one thing here. In case I'm going on and off because of my bad network, you all please continue. I'll catch up.
Okay, sure. Sounds good. So I was just,
Okay, please.
yeah, I was just reading this poem, Almond Delight. This is how it goes. Almond. The L dropped like a pebble dropping in the calm waters with a plop. Almond. The L dropped makes all the difference. I repeat it to myself like a child gladdened by a sudden delight. Almond, almond, almond. Mother used to tell me, I have lovely almond eyes. It's a very, almond is a very, I mean, it's a regular nut, right? I mean, there's nothing very special about it. But the last two lines, and how she has drawn our attention to the fact that the L is never pronounced there. And then at the very end, she takes her to a different paradigm altogether by saying that mother used to tell me I have lovely almond eyes, and that immediately transforms the reader's mind into I mean, it presents an image of a child and a mother, which had nothing to do with the first portion of the poem. And this is the kind of um, the suddenness that strikes the reader, the impact it makes, the visual imagery becomes all the more strong because of the contrast between the first paragraph and the final two lines. And that contrast, that leaves an impact, and it makes the poem profound. So this is one example. And I'll just give one more example before I hand it over to Nami again. So let's see which one. I mentioned oranges earlier, but I'll not do oranges right after almonds. Too much of nuts and fruits, and it might make us hungry. So I'll choose something else, I guess. Um, yeah, the other one I had, bookmarked was couple goals. So again, I mean, all of us who are couples and would know that couple goals is a regular thing. I mean, every couple has goals, and couple goal setting is like one of the most important thing for couples nowadays, especially. So what's so special about this poem then? What is not mundane about this poem, rather? Exactly at the last 6:38, I killed the still young evening for you with wordy bullet sprays, then cried foul and called you the murderer. Now my face is rain splashed with remorse, regret, repentance. I want to undo all those words and instead just do you. Do you too? This would resonate with any person who has gone through an intense relationship. In even when we are in a relationship, uh, we end up saying things that we don't intend, we because of the kind of expectation that gets set during the evolving of a relationship. In the beginning everything is all fine because you don't expect, and then with the beginning of expectations and failure to meet those expectations, the goals remain unreached. So but the wordplay here, I killed the still young evening for you, and that actually draws your attention to how many evenings we have just killed by saying the wrong things, and then we have hated ourselves for not saying the right things at the right time, because we could not at that moment. But within ourselves, within our minds, we keep repeating those words to ourselves, that I didn't want to do this. How can I take it back? That yearning to take back those words, that comes out so loud and clear in this poem. So this is how she's touching every heart, and her poems are easy to interpret. Such poems, I mean, you don't have to really look into a dictionary to understand this poem, or you don't have to hold a master's degree in English to understand this poem. You just have to feel it. That is what poetry should be about, to be honest. Poetry is something that should just pierce you and get into you and leave you gasping for breath, and this poem did that to me. So with I have done a lot of talking for now, I guess, so I'll hand it over to Nami. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Annie, for such lovely words. And now I would like to invite our second panelist, Dr. Amit Shankar Saha. I would like to introduce him before. Amit Shankar Saha is an award winning author of three collections of poems titled Balconies of Time, Fugitive Words, and Illicit Poems. His poems have appeared in the Year's Book of Indian Poetry in English 2020-21 and the Best Indian Poetry 2018. A Pushcart Prize, Griffin Poetry Prize, and Best of Net nominee. He has a PhD in English from Calcutta University and teaches at CCOM Skills University. He is also an editor-in-chief chief of EKL Review. I invite Amit just to share his poems and his views.
Yeah, thank you very much, Navita. Uh, it's a great pleasure to speak about Nivedita's debut collection of poems, Larkspur Lane, Branch Labyrinths of the Mind. And it's true, like when she started off and she sent the manuscript, I was saying, like, this is a huge collection. So usually we have poetic books, like they are like not very many pages. Even like there are so many chapbooks. But you can see that this is a book which she has taken an effort to collate all that she has written over a period of time. And like what I read the preface where she writes, what we poets fear the most is perhaps emotional numbness. And here, poems are filled with emotions. So it's like by writing poems, she's avoiding that numbness. And in another part of the preface, she writes, light and the depths of joy, bliss, gratitude, and awe are equally potent poetic triggers. As she has acknowledged that she has been passing through some psychological phases. But this positive aspect, that light, gratitude, joy, bliss, these can also trigger poetry. And that positive attitude is very commendable. Because like with sadness, poetry comes easy. But to convert a moment of joy into poetry is quite difficult. So today, as she has allotted me to speak about intertextuality and techniques in the poems of Larkspur Lane, which, like, after hearing that she's a gold medalist and a silver medalist, so I'm like, it will be too much for me to speak about those techniques. But anyway, since that is what, and since we were discussing about intertextuality also, like one of my favorite movies is the novel as well as the movie is The English Patient by the movie. The book is by Michael Ondaatje. And the movie version of that book was so poetic. And then I find in these poems, not once, but in 3 poems, there is a reference to the cave of swimmers. I'll just read a few lines of those. There is a poem titled Cave of Swimmers, which is a direct reference to The English Patient. I'll read those lines. So, like, the first word that caught my attention was the name Almasi. So I'll read the last stanza of this poem. What am I? Do you know my name? I forgot. Aeons back, traveling with you on a camel back, heard promises of Almasi to return to kiss her Bosphorus, and in that bottomless pit of hope, cave of swimmers keeps shimmering in an eternal waiting. That eternal waiting, the movie version and the novel, you keep someone and promise to return. And that person, you know, you will never be able to return. There is a kind of poetry in that everlasting wait. And that comes repeatedly in her poems. There is another poem, page 88, I'll just read. In a poem like War Zone, there is a line. It lands on my Almasi Bosphorus. So like this line, she's referring to a part of her body. And yet, by referring to an incident in a novel or a movie, she is giving it so much depth. She's like opening a key, just like earlier Ananya Chatterjee mentioned about that poem Aman, and the last 2 lines, that almost gives the reader a key to enter into a different depth of the poem. So these intertextual references, they also give that key to enter a different depth of a poem. The body does not remain just a body of a woman. It becomes like part of a waiting, something monolith, something that marks an endless patience. And then again, in another poem, that meant it is again the Cave of Swimmers. with murals, muses, muslin, veiling those eyes, a seal, the sheer shearing of my lamb, or woolen clothes for my winter, mere shellfish act, not love making, not my cup of tea, wine, tears, my inners joyfully, not grudgingly. There is a kind of rhythm, even if you don't get into the poem, just the repetition of certain words, appearance of a juxtaposition of a few words, they give you an insight, give you a auditory effect. Like poetry is not just about words and their meanings; it also has a auditory aspect to it. And this juxtaposition of certain words, and these are, you can see, these words have come quite effortlessly to her. She has not sat down and chosen these words from a dictionary to put them. They have come quite naturally, and that is how poetry comes. And as she acknowledges, she does not write poetry. Poetry comes to her, and these words, like, okay, the advantage that she has, that she is from a literature background, so these words are in her mind. But not everyone who studies literature can have that facility to have these words connect, juxtapose themselves in such poetic manner. And then in the same poem, the poem is titled Jealousy Unmade, with these references of Cave of Swimmers. There is other Laurentian, and almost unconsciously, she has mentioned quite a bedspread where there is a hole in the middle. And I was talking with her, and I told her, this is something that reminds me of Midnight Children, where Adam Aziz, through a perforated sheet, he's Dr. Adam Aziz, who is checking his would-be wife through a perforated sheet. So this middle waist of a bed sheet, which has a hole in it. So, but her point of view was that this, she has referred to something else, not to Midnight Children. But that is the amazing thing about intertextuality, that you are not conscious of making a reference. You may be making it with some other thing, like if you are making something of reference to Second Coming. So obviously, your first reference may be to Yeats's poem Second Coming, but that Second Coming is also a reference to the Bible. So you may be conscious of one reference from which you are taking that intertextual element, and at the same time, when you're making that reference, alongside another reference is being made, which you are not aware of. Even if you are aware of, you're not actually referring to that thing, but the reader has this amazing ability, has this amazing opportunity to make two interpretations. So that is one of the techniques that, especially her literature background, perhaps unconsciously gives her. There are many references, literary intertextuality, like in poems like in page 116, if I go, like in a poem like Morning, page 116, there is a reference to Second Coming, but there is also a reference here twin souls, however one, how will they ever merge? These two lines immediately reminded me of John Donne's poem Canonization. With twin souls, they were merging, and there's the riddle of the phoenix. The two lovers, they are merging together. And this is quite a reference here she makes. In fact, in another poem, like the Nocturnal King with Poetry, or no, the two poems unite in page 120, just a few pages later, she refers to two poems unite. Desire's Flight, I See, Ecstasy. Ecstasy, isn't that another poem of John Donne? So the intertextual elements, because she may have read John Donne maybe 20 years ago, but they have come. Just see, ecstasy is a common word, but when you refer to ecstasy in the context of where two poems unite and in the context of twin souls, however one, you're always reminded of John Donne. He has done it first. And so, and then there are so many other references. And like one of the interesting, like I was referring to Knit Ophelia and Hamlet Mine. Those two poems, reference to Ophelia and Hamlet, they come side by side. And it's an amazing thing that they have arranged themselves like that. And then obviously, if Donne is there, the ecstasy and canonizations are referred, then Coy Mistress is also there in poem like My Nocturnal Kink with Poetry, page 225. And you know, Andrew Marvell's Coy Mistress. So these metaphysical elements are also in her poem, even though these are very, very modern poems. But we know that metaphysical poems are very akin to modern poetry. And obviously, if there are references to metaphysical poets, obviously there will be references to modern poetry also. And you have, again, the same thing which I referred. In this poem, April is no cruelest month. There is immediately two references. April is referred in Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. April is again referred by T.S. Eliot in his true form. So this amazing intertextuality makes a poem so very rich. You are entering one poem, but the intertextual element takes you to other poems. And if you delve into those poems, and with reference to those poems, if you read Nivedita Dey's poem, then they become even more in-depth. And that is amazing about any good literature. And that's why her poetry are also in the category of good literature. Like in a poem like Not a Romantic Poet, page 324, there is, when she's writing about not a romantic poet, obviously the romantic poets and all poems are referred there. Let me just find it. In this poem, the Lake District is mentioned, where the romantic poet Wordsworth and Coleridge used to live. But interestingly, in the second line itself, she writes, I read the first two lines, notion of the romantic, evaporized, etherized into clouds. Etherized, like a patient etherized, once again T.S. Eliot. And then she goes on with reference to War and Peace, and other things are there with Tolstoy. So this is what Salman Rushdie once said. We don't belong to just one tradition, one literary heritage. The world is ours. We are as part of Indian tradition, as we are part of European tradition, as we are part of Russian tradition. Our poetry are much richer than those who belong to just one tradition. We are not just Indian poets. We are, our literary forefathers are also Russians. Our literary forefathers are Americans. Our literary forefathers are English. So if there is a reference to Gokul tree, there are also references to the daffodils. And it is not very odd to have such references. We know, like even earlier, poets have referred to India and West Indies, places too far up, so far apart. And no one like, and that's the amazing thing about poetry. It can bring two far things together and make them sound as if they belong there. Another thing that I will like to speak apart from the intertextual part is that in her preface, you will see she had mentioned about this enjambment, extended enjambment, which she has renamed as complex open enjambment. What is this? Just one poem I will read to show you, page 22 to 87. Maps of Ruin. The first three lines, the first stanza, which is of 3 lines. My wall, the wall I so loved, today lies broken in heaps of ruin. How many ways can you read these 3 lines? If you read it continuously, my wall, the wall I so loved today, and you pause there, lies broken, you again pause, in heaps of ruin. Or you can read it like this: my wall, the wall I so loved, today lies broken in heaps of ruin. Or you can read it like this: my wall, the wall I so loved, today lies broken in, and separately heaps of ruin. So with every pause, you enter a different meaning. And that is what she calls as complex open enjambment. Because she's not giving any punctuation to force a reader to pause at a particular point where she wants. She's keeping it open. So wherever you can continue with the line, you can stop, and you can read that line in whatever way in order to get multiple meanings. And all those meanings are valid. And it is not, these things cannot be very, very artificially, deliberately done. These have to come naturally in a poem. And that is the naturalness, the spontaneity with which she gets these enjambments. And that is a hallmark of a poetry. I think I've been talking a bit too much now. So I should stop already. But like, if I talk too much, you won't be able to enjoy the poems. So it is better that you read the poem and enjoy these things. Thank you very much. Over to Namita.
Thank you, Dr. Saha. Such wonderful insights about poetry since I'm not a poet, so it's interesting to know such perspectives. And now we invite our third panelist in the evening is Walda Organ. Let me just introduce a brief introduction about her. Walda, Walda is a full-time writer and editor living in St. John's, Newfoundland. A member of the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland, she is also the founder and former managing editor of Tuck Magazine, an online global human rights, arts and literature publication. In 2013, she was a guest panelist at the 40th anniversary of the Writers' Union of Canada to discuss the advent of independent publishing and its long-term effects on the industry. Her freelance interviews and book reviews, as well as poetry and short fiction, can be found in an assortment of prints and online publications such as Horizons Magazine, Her Circle, The Cover Anthology, Sibling Rivalry Press, Unbound Content, Reader's Digest, and Tuck Magazine. In 2021, her story, 1975, was longlisted for the CBC Books Prize for nonfiction. She's currently working on a memoir and a book of short fictions. I would now invite Walter to speak a few words about poetries on Nivedita. So you need to unmute yourself. We are unable to hear you. Can you unmute yourself, Walter?
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as I was saying, silently for a moment, I haven't done this for a while, so I'm a bit rusty. I've kind of been immersed in my own work, so my headspace has been rather small and a little bit of tunnel vision here. But I agree with absolutely everyone who's spoken before about this book. It's the first thing I noticed about it when Nivedita contacted me to write the foreword. Was how fat this book was, and how indicative it was of what life is. A poet is, Shelley said that poets were the legislators of humanity, and I agree with that. And as such, the poet's life is a reflection of the lives of other people. And if you tend toward believing that everyone on this planet is connected, then the singular experience of the poet is certainly only unique in the way in which the poet internalizes it and processes it. I love how she set this book out. I love the categorizing, and I love it's almost as if she's done some sort of a review of her own spirit, and the spiritual growth that she's lived through and shared with people daily. And probably this is something else that I'd like to say. There's a misconception that poets are somehow, there's an old joke, you know, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a poet. And what do you do for the other 23 hours? And it's it's not the way that it used. I mean, it used to be poets were rock stars. I mean, even as early as the 1920s. You know, Edna St. Vincent Millay, who I'm going to cite in a moment in reference to Nivedita's work, was herself a massively popular poet. She was the first woman to win the Pulitzer for poetry. She was a brilliant activist and a pacifist, which ultimately killed her career. But the thing about, and I when I was reading Nivedita's book, I was immediately captivated by the similarity between Nivedita's processing of feelings and coming out the other end a full human being and in charge of her femininity and understanding her place in the world and how important it is to speak to others through this process that she's come through. I've chosen 3 of her poems, and what I'd like to do, rather than just read one, then analyze it, and read another and analyze it, I'd like to read them in an order, because I hope the ones that I've chosen can express that process I'm talking about. The introspection that poets are known for, which a lot of people who don't appreciate poetry anymore call self-absorption, but it's not. It's a necessary primary foundation to the poet's growth. You have to have that introspection. And one of the ways in which we had, of course, I would have liked to have cited a couple of other poems that were chosen today, but I've had to kind of make a quick change here. One of the things, of course, every poet focuses on, which is to me, is certainly the building block of society and of the individual, is love. It's the energy of everything. And I would like to read Misnomer Set Right. Afterward, I want to read Lime of Life, because it's just such a wonderful transition from that introspection into coming to terms with life and reality. And lastly, I'm going to read Poetry, What Are You? Another evolution into, okay, so now I'm doing this. This is I was born with the poet's personality, because I firmly believe that. I think that poets are born, not made. Amit was very correct in stating that, you know, you can get a lit degree, you can do all these things, but you really must have that particular bent, that particular understanding of how to see the world and how to internalize it. Poets are very brave people, and Nivedita is no different. You know, if you look at a lot of people who have brought attention to certain things, I'm thinking specifically now of Maya Angelou, who was very vocal about racism, but in such a kind of a subdued but conniving way. She crawled into your heart and your consciousness. I was actually, last night I was reading her, some of her work, and one of my favorite poems is The Mama Welfare Roll, because she makes such a statement there about women and dependence and racism. And she brought attention to all of these things, and child abuse, all of that. Exactly as Nivedita has done with her book, exactly that. All of these things are part of a full life, but it's the poet's job to internalize it, examine it, analyze it, experience it. And unfortunately for some people, they don't survive it. And I think that also needs to be stated here. Sylvia Plath is a perfect example of that. Brought great attention to, excuse me, I have a cat behind me. Oh, a cat video. She didn't survive it, but she brought an immense attention to mental health issues and the inequality of women of a certain class at that time when they were really quite invisible. And Nivedita, I mean, this book is absolutely beautiful, because I don't think that there is one area of life, particularly of a woman's life, that she hasn't focused shining a hard light on those experiences and on those feelings. And she's not afraid either of talking about her own deficit as a person occasionally. And that is the depths that poets sometimes, you know, have to explore, and that is why some don't make it, or some don't even write the book. To even have done this, I don't think people who aren't poets or writers can comprehend how, just what it takes to be brave enough to share these feelings with the world. It really is courage. But and that being said, I think that type of courage also has to do with the expansiveness of a poet and their need to reflect society. And I'm just going to end with that and read her poetry, because that's really what we do as poets. We reflect, we are a mirror for society through our own personal experiences. And we take that gift that we have, and we go through very, very difficult emotional times in doing this. So, Misnomer Set Right. Love is ice pack bomb over the ravaging rage of lies, eyes, goodbyes. Love is apple bite hard, crunchy, crackling warmth of the fireplace hearth. Love is silence drowning all noise as underwater currents, strong, sound, safe. Love is beyond boundaries of war and peace, ceasefires. lotus leaves serene. Love is sturdy wooden stage, untouched by the plots and plays. What is when it's all over? Love is all there ever was. Love is all there ever is. Love is the singular will be forevermore. Lime of life. Reality. Oh, that bitch is harsh, they say. I say, yeah, and yet not. Utterly unappetizing, acerbic juice of the strongest lime against our hangovers, post-hope. And all her stillborn dreams, built on shifting sand dunes of space, time. Not everyone needs a dose of it every day. I do, as I get drunk every night on unreal places and phantom faces, deadly dreams and palatial pleasure domes, where none exists, there I daily dance. To my own Phoenixian doom, yet each time, infallibly, life rushes to the rescue up. Redeem me from this macabre maze, with a silver dross of reality, sourest lime, harshest bitch, Man Friday, to life's zealous care. And final poem that I'd like to read is poetry. What are you? Poetry. Are you discipline or desire? Are you bouldered brook banks or boundless oceans haywire? If you are a mystery, be so, but tell me, ho, your feline paws upon my nocturnal breasts, are they Schrodinger's or Cheshire? They bid for you, on you, atop you. They mount like a Trojan horse, trotting away to the hope halls of name and fame and acclaim. They hope to sell you for, and so tell me, ho, was there ever birthed such a lavish buyer to afford you without courting, without wooing? You can't be allured, not even alluded to, but in the dreams of all the deluded, like I, to own, be known as master of yours, attempts to enslave your dainty wings to shackles of my empty empire. All this for what but not? She's gone from the introspection of love to the embracing of reality, the reality of life, to asking herself, what am I doing? What is this introspection about? You know, what is this acceptance of the state of human beings, of humanity? And why am I writing this down? Why is this filtering through me? And what are you? What are you, poetry? Are you a separate entity that takes possession of me from time to time and uses me? Or am I in control of you? Are you something I can access? I think it's probably a little of both. Nivedita, we've kind of been off and on for a few years. My husband and I published her in Tuck magazine. We saw something very special then, obviously. The thing I loved about her was her enthusiasm for it and her openness to discussing, any changes that needed to be made. And I think a lot of poets, a good test of a poet's mettle and their belief in their work is their ability to accept criticism from time to time or to amend whatever they've written. And she was always so very open, but so little was needed to be done. She's very expert at knowing where to place words on a page. Such expressiveness, and it's not. I know a lot of poets that I've dealt with in the past didn't have the comprehension or the understanding of the sensory aspect of poetry, and would just put a word here or put a word there because they felt that it would elicit some sort of emotional response in the reader, but it would make no sense to the text. But Nivedita is gifted. She knows exactly what she's doing. It's not contrived. I don't mean to say that, but she is an expert at where to place her emotional phrases. She understands the sensuality of poetry. I definitely have been publicizing her book for her, because I believe it really should be read. And I would also like to say that Amit was also correct. Poetry is, it really is genderless, it's raceless. It is the one area of the arts that has a type of alchemy that it's an immediate connection between yourself and the creator. And it blots out those things like gender, like race, like religion. It has to do with you and with me and with our experience on this earth as we walk through this life. And I have to say, Nivedita has lived a very rich experience, clearly, and has gleaned from that an immense amount of spiritual knowledge. And I love her to bits for sharing this with everyone. And it's a gift. This book is absolutely a gift to the poetry community, and it is a gift to lovers of verse. Poetry is not dead. It's just it has just had a metamorphosis of sorts, and this is true to the tradition of poetry, and I love that. We have other poetry. I mean, there's pop music, lyrics are poetry, rap music's poetry, hip hop's poetry. It's not dead. Slam poetry had a massive impact a few years ago. I'm sure it's still around somewhere on some street corner, particularly in Australia. They're very big on their slam, but I like it because it is structured in a respectful way toward traditional poetry in many respects, but she's broken some rules, and I love that too. I love the free form way that she speaks, and there is a bit of Maya Angelou's sensuousness in it. There's a bit of certainly of Malay's strident activism in it, and and Sylvia Plath's introspection and self-love coupled with self-loathing. She's got it all going on here, and I really, really love this book. It's beautiful, and I love the title. I think the title is incredible. It was the very first thing that struck me. It's lovely, absolutely lovely, and the cover's gorgeous. Can't say enough about it. But I'm going to leave it there, and because unless you want me to sit here and read the entire book, because I could do that. So I'm going to turn it over to our lovely moderator, and allow the next person to speak about this really, really beautifully infectious book of verse.
Thank you, Valda. And I am now going to introduce our fourth panelist because she is the moderator herself. So I am going to introduce Namita, and Namita is a brilliant psychologist and therapist, and she's been practicing for the last 19 plus years. She did her zoology BSc, and after that she did her psychology, BA psychology, and from Mumbai University. And from there on, she went on to do a myriad of significant therapeutic courses. Like she's done her hypnotherapy, she has done constellation work, she has done inner child healing work, transpersonal regression therapy. She has done a gamut of very, very significant therapeutic courses. She is associated with Eka Hypnotherapy School, Yuvraj Kapadia. She's associated with that. She's a trainer at Transpersonal Regression Therapy at TASO. That's Hans Tandem's Institute. She has done Life Between Lives course, and she's an expert in that too. She has she is an expert in inner child healing, and she's done her inner child healing course also from Trisha C of USA. So she has a lot of expertise, a lot of not just courses and degrees, but she has a very, very razor sharp insight into human psychology. Like if you go to Namita, and she's my go-to person in many, many ways. And I can vouch for her that if you go to her, and she's going to like literally throw the light right where it needs to be thrown. A lovely human being, and I'm so glad that she's doing this for me today. And she's also worked with, like, her clientele is from Bollywood celebrities to academicians of IIT, IIM, housewives, college students. She works with all sorts of people, and lovely human being and a brilliant, brilliant professional. So I just want to now request Namita to speak on uh, the book and her thoughts on it.
Thank you, Nivedita. So, firstly, I now feel like an outsider because there are such eminent poets here who talk about poetry, and I'm like a novice thinking, what am I going to say? I think when I heard Ambed and when I heard Valda also, I so resonated with them that they spoke a lot of things that I wanted to speak about. And I also believe a poet has no religion because they pour their hearts out. Poetry is about emotions. Poetry is about, when I look at as a therapist, uh, poetry becomes a channel, an outlet to put your heart out there. And the ones who want their heart to be seen become poets. As Walter rightly said, it's a courageous task. Some of us silently come for therapy and wrap it up there, and some take it beyond us and put it in poetry and our art so that even others get inspired to find a way to give a channel, a path to their own inner turmoils. And when I look at these poetries, and I've been reading them since yesterday, uh, and I was uh, try to analytically analyzes and all that stuff, and I couldn't, but I can feel it. I'm a person who feels words. And when I see that, I see the turmoil. Every word creates an image in front of my eyes. The struggles of every human being who has gone through these, milestones of struggles or cycles. And Nivedita has given it such a beautiful expression to each of them. And every person who reads it can find a piece of them in these poetries. And I'm not an expert like all the people in panel, so I will read a poetry. uh, I don't know if I can really do justice to poetry reading here, but there's one poetry that I would like to say, and there are a few others that I could mention here, where I saw how beautifully when you're reading those words, I had the visuals of it. I could see what was the struggle, the turmoil in that moment when this person was feeling these emotions, and being able to give words to it. That's beautiful. As a therapist, I see a lot of times people struggle to give a voice to their joy and sometimes to their pain. And knowing her personally, and when I see the writings, she's beautifully been able to give a language to so many emotions. So there's one poem I will read here first. No savior but I. Floods of fire rush in between the years. Years of nightmares tumble onto tomorrow. No savior but I. Fingers nailed to fags. Lungs a mere mechanical suction. Yet none goes in. No air, no smoke, no soothe. Only breath out. Fire. I am the mythical dragon, exhaling fire, spreading through my face, my fate. Caged, I rave and rant to shake the flood off. No luck, no savior, but I. It's it's a transition from one emotion of struggle and being caged, and yet recognizing that who you are is also a fire raging dragon, and yet also recognizing the bigger picture that I'm caged. So I see my power, my strength, and yet I also recognize how I have caught myself up in something. And the only person who can say probably is myself in that moment. And I would like to read a little paragraph from the poem Scattered because it's just caught my eye. I feel scattered like breadcrumbs on my soiled bed. I try to hibernate, but oh, windows won't leave me alone. that paragraph, as a therapist, when I see it, keeps me in a sense of pause, because the word scattered stayed with me. And how many times when we feel an emotion or an event that happens in our life, when trauma crisis happens, we recognize that we scatter. We scatter into multiple emotions of who we are. A scared person who we become, the angry person we become, the grief we become, and the sadness we become. And then we are gently collecting all those pieces of us through poetry, some through therapy, and there are various other art forms. Piece it again like a mosaic. Not what it was before, but something beautiful this time, different. You rebuild yourself. And Nivedita has given so many poetries where she's rebuilt herself into something beautiful that still shines and reflects light. And I wish her all the best for the courageous attempt to inspire so many people to put their heart out there for others to be seen. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And I'm really, really happy for this, for you. And I take my time. I now have to go back to being the moderator here. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for making me a part of this beautiful and important event in your life. And now I go back as my role as a moderator here. So now, since we have concluded the panel discussion, we are moving to brief question and answers before we get into poetry reading. And some of the questions that I'll be asking Nivedita, and she'll be answering it for us. Are you ready, Nivedita?
Yes.
I came across the first question. I came across a caption saying, "What good is a poem if you have to explain it later?" How often do you have to explain to others what the poem is about? Or are you open to Mirad's interpretation of single poem?
Uh, yeah. So, of course, as a poet, I am open to readers interpreting. I cannot ever deny any reader of that right. That's their, as a reader, it's their birthright. At the same time, if I have to be brutally honest, I'm not a huge fan of reader response theory. There's a poem in the book also on reader response theory. So, yeah, to be honest, I'm not a big fan. But then again, it's like that. Like if I am dressing up my baby in a pink dress, I mean, you're allowed to read as many shades of pink in it. But if you're going to undress her of that pink dress and you're going to put a blue dress on her, then I might, as the mother of the child, feel a little ouch. But other than that, yes, I am absolutely open to different interpretations. And also, as Amit was already mentioning, the entire technique of like 90% lines in this collection has this technique called complex open enjambment. So every line inherently has the potential of being read in more than one, maybe two or three ways of reading it. So yes, this collection itself, and with this technique of complex open enjambment, uh, it's inherent. Multiple readings, multiple interpretation is inherent. But then again, yeah, like within a context. Like even when we are talking about reader response theory, it was about within the body of a text, within the body or the community of readers, there are certain meanings inherent. And within that context, yes, multiple readings are definitely possible. How often do I explain my poems? Not really, but yeah, if somebody asks me, I'm happy to. But yeah, I don't go forward and jump into it and say, no, 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 you're reading it wrong. No, that I'll not do. But yeah.
Okay. Second question. In your experience as a writer, what is the most powerful learning you've had that has helped you deal with self doubt and encouraged you to complete a piece to the last dot?
Um, as I said, poetry, it's not me writing consciously. So most often when it comes to poetry, there's no question of finishing it to the dot. It's just an overflow. It's like puking. You don't complete puking consciously. So it comes and you just puke it out. So that struggle I have not had with poetry, unless, yes, like maybe 10% of it, if I'm really trying to write something consciously and trying to refine it, yes. uh, I mean, if it comes to prose, I have still not completed those probably 4 or 5 manuscripts lying there. So once I complete it, I'll be able to share my experience. Yeah, but poetry, that's not been there. So
One more question. A, a lot of poetry today is being written in different styles. A question comes to my mind. Do you write poetry for the years of the reading them in text format? Or, sorry, do you write poetries for the years or for reading them in text format?
text format as in reading for the like poetry for the eyes or poetry for the ears? Yeah, so yeah, that's one another age old debate going on in the poetry world, I guess. And yes, many of the legends believe in poetry mainly being for the ears. And I remember Yeats, when he was around 70 plus, at the fag end of his life, he even said something like, I have spent my entire life clearing out of my poetry what was there for the eyes, and I have kind of brought the syntax back to what's only for the ears. So I know that I even have had discussions with Amit over the origin of poetry, the Vedas and everything that came. It was all oral, so it was all for the ears. So poetry basically originated for the ears, and mine too are for the ears, for the eyes. But uh, again, to be honest, I would say my poetry is more for the eyes and less for the ears, because again, because of the technique that I use. Like, if you're reading a poetry, if you're hearing a poetry, you cannot probably read multiple enjambments into the line in one reading. Then you'll have to read the same poetry in 3 different manners. Also, I play a lot with homophones. So I remember there's a poem, there are a couple of lines where two eyes, two eyes. So TO eyes and TWO eyes. So if you're hearing that, it will completely be lost on the ears. You have to see it to understand the context or the meaning. So yeah, if I can put a vaguely rough, vague ratio to it, I would say my poetry, personally speaking, is 70% for the eyes and 30% for the ears. And I don't know how many feathers that will ruffle, but I have to be honest.
So what I'm hearing here is, if I read the poetry, it becomes mine, because then the enchantment that you all talked about is where I feel something, and that's where I pause. So every person who's reading the poetry can make it theirs, because it's talking about them,
Absolutely.
probably. But that's what I saw when I was getting the technical thing. That's very amazing. So the one last question before we move to poetry reading. A lot of your poetry is sultry and sensual in mood and tone. From where do you get your inspiration? Longing, uh, forlornness, if it's the word, mind. And unrequited yearnings are wonderful inspiration for poetry and song. So how do you get your inspiration, Nivedita? That's the question.
I think there's the answer inherent, already embedded in the question. So yeah, my inspiration mainly is, again, emotions, life experiences, as correctly pointed out, the longings, the yearnings, the
Nivedita? So what, we will continue with the poetry reading till we have Nivedita come back and join us. So So now we are opening the floor for poetry reading from the Larkspur Lane. And I first request the poet. Right now, the poet Nivedita is unable to join because there is a system issue. So I would like to invite the other poets who are there. So I would invite Saptarishi Roy Chaudhary to start with poetry till we have Nivedita to join us back again. Are you there, Saptarishi? One minute. Okay. Is Manu there? Manu George? Okay. Okay, then right now I can only see Amlan on this screen, so I would like to invite Amlan to read a poetry till Nivedita. Sorry, Nivedita, I've gone ahead with the poetry reading. Amlan, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah. I just realized I got cut off.
Thank you,
No
Amlan.
problem. I'm glad. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to read. Perhaps among the ones that I've read so far, my favorite one. Um, it's called Dehradun. Coniferous domes of pine, oil, floor cleaners, fragrances of wintry peaks playing on the spine, in the vale dashed with red rhododendrons, scented on slants, dappling an upward steep with cold sun, cool breeze of birches, breaching the senses with soothing, aromatic homecoming. All this winter morn, descend upon my tropical, muddy bathroom floor, flooding my tub with scents memorized, bringing the strangely familiar fragrant hills down to a cityscape cramped with hardly a breathing space, sudden grace, heaven inhaled in hell, heaven inhaled in hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Amlan. Such a beautiful way of expressing poetry. Every reader gives a different kind of a life to the poem. Now, I would like to invite Mohan Dubeji, and thanks for the patience of all the people who have still been present here. And I would like to invite Mr. Mohan Dubeji to
Thanks a lot
share
for
a
inviting
poetry.
me here. And it's a privilege to be here among so many learned people. I'm a very new poet. I recently interacted with Nivedita ji. So I'll start with my one poem. Nivedita's one poem that was left unfinished. And I have translated it in Hindi. So probably this will a different kind of taste from one of her poetry. So should I start in Hindi? Hello. Thank you.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Started like that. एक पेपर कप में रखी आधी पी हुई दार्जिलिंग चाय जो पहले मध्यम हुई फिर ठंडी हो गई एक आधा खाई हुई लाल छरबेर में स्ट्रॉबेरी जिसमें दांतों के निशान अभी ताजे हैं तेज हवा सहते हुए टूटी हुई कांच की खिड़की के पल्ले आधे खुले आधे बंद अचानक लगी आग में आधा जलकर लटका हुआ एक नया पर्दा एक नई दीवार पर नमी के धब्बों से बंधा हुआ एक आधा झुलसा हुआ चेहरे का निशान पुराने मटमैले से स्नानागार में नए नल का आधा अधूरा काम जहां से अभी भी पानी रीस रहा है आधी बीती हुई जुलाई में एक फड़फड़ाता हुआ कैलेंडर जिसके 10 पन्ने गायब हैं एक आधी भरी पुरानी डायरी एकाक की गई एक आखिरी प्रविष्टि के साथ जो अब रजत मिनाब जुटा रही है एक चश्मा जिसके जंगले हुए फ्रेम से एक सोडा ग्लास कहीं गिर गया है एक साधारण सी तोड़कर आधी गिर गई खिलौने की गुड़िया जिसमें अब बस एक ही हाथ बचा है आधी खुली हुई चूहेदानी में रखा बेहोश पड़े चूहे द्वारा आधा खाया हुआ जहरीला मांस का आधा टुकड़ा मेरी पालतू बिल्ली आधी सोई हुई तुम्हारी पालतू बिल्ली आधी जागी हुई और श्रीनगर की एक ही समय जागती और सोई हुई अधूरी सूची अभी चलती चली जा रही है आकाश जो कि एक बार स्लेटी और काले रंग के बादलों के साथ बारिश ला रहे थे, अब अचानक से चौंकाने वाले साफ नीले रंग के साथ पूरी तरह खाली दिख रहे हैं। आकाश में दिखते सफेद रूही के फाहे से बने महल जो कि अब बड़ी ही सफाई के साथ मिटा दिए गए हैं। अब मैं जब कहीं नहीं हूं, तुम मुझे ढूंढते हो। आई रिपीट दिस, अब जब कहीं नहीं हूं, तुम मुझे ढूंढते हो। अब जब तुम मुझे बड़े ही लगाव से ढूंढते हो, तुमको मेरा नाम तुमको मेरा नाम मेरे आंसू और खून की नीली शाही से कहीं उकेरा हुआ मिल सकता है। और ये सब अधूरे हैं, अधूरे छोड़ दिए गए हैं, रह गए हैं एक अधूरा सा इतिहास में। So this was a translation of a poetry left unfinished. And again, there's a one small poem that is very close to my heart. And really speaking, whenever I read, I have read it more than 50 times literally. Every time it's so appealing to me. Goes like that. Page number 351. There he sleeps in the lurid pretending arms. Here I toss and turn in the arms of my lucid dreams of him undone. Broken promises blooming under my skin as the plastic rim process brought for me. He bought for me, sorry. Just the other day, now gone, now faded. These eyes, this mind, zeded with memories. I make love with each night. I make love it each night, pregnant with a premature pause, never meant, never prepared for. I now grown again and again, each night, a new poem is born. It's very so it's a wonderful poetry and it's very close to my heart. Thank you for making part of this beautiful gathering. Too much new in this, well, very much new in this field. Basically, I'm a professional from the finance background. Literature has not my never been my subject. So this is my first try and first actually honest appearance from any kind of this launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamaji. Very beautifully, I could see how you were emoting those poems. आपने हिंदी में भी जो कविता बताई, बड़ी सुंदरता से आपने उस एहसास को भी express किया. I didn't know that you were a first timer here.
No, this
It was
this
wonderful.
first.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thanks.
So now again would like to invite Nivedita to share a poetry here because she just had a vanishing act and now she's back again. So Nivedita, here, can you read
Yeah,
poetry
and
for us?
yeah, I think
Thank
I'll
you.
just thanks so much, Namita. I think we are also running a bit late, so I'll quickly read a few of the shorter poems which are close to my heart. Yeah. So the first one, okay. Before that or after, I just wanted to mention somebody here before I read the poems. This Chitra Iyer, she is from the Notion Press. She's my publishing manager. So I just want to let everyone know that this book was possible because of Chitra. Like there were days and days when we were like completely in despair whether we'll be able to meet the deadline or not. That little, as in when I was almost at the brink of despair, she kept her cool, she kept her patience, and she kept encouraging me. So this book was actually possible because of Chitra. So thank you so much, Chitra. Now, having said that, I will go ahead with my reading. So this is on page 39, if anyone wants to read along with me. It's called Blue Tarpaulin Tattered. Blue tarpaulin tattered, sways in the slant of a storm, our kitchen cooks are. Broth of blindness delirious, threatening to uproot all, pegs, holes in earth, the moon. You slant the pot to pour steaming, frothy, crushed beans in my eyes, dreaming of another pair of those eyes. Wake me up, pull me out, by hand to gently show me what love has done. Afternoon sun, sweet, soft clangs of labor's tongs, fixing, lifting, erecting our tent firm on your moon's mounts. So that's one poem. And the next one that I would like to read it's called Meta Poetry, page 246. Layer by layer, I peel off in search of the cosmos within. A dwarf with the lamp, piles of dark sheets adorned, cocooned, cozy. Past wools of desire and dearth basks in itself. Peel by peel, unpeeling, I reach the Milky Way, Nebula Rosa, the primordial void. Reverse glance revealing ants crawling on planet home. Swords, spears, tridents raised, acid rains, oblivion reigns. In me foremost, all else too, sages of the distant shore, putting back peeled peels in place, picking up my pen, I birth this poem. There's one small poem, and I'll just read two more. One of them a very small one, short one, page 62, Loving the Beast. The labyrinths of extinguished flames scorch. Love floods my muddied porch without and within. That paw, blamed to be unseen, tears up the skies, reaching as low as lowly firefly eye. Paws me head to toe. Sky bursts as love erupts, sprinkling pearls on petals. And the last one. So somebody recently asked me before I was coming for the launch that what is your next book and what is in the pipeline. So that's again in the pipeline, but the last section of the book called On Being Stranded is actually a sneak peek to the one that probably is coming, rather coming. So I would like to read one of them. And this book, this collection is actually has a lot many muses. The next one might have just a single muse. So this poem goes out to that muse. The person is, due to various circumstances, not able to be present here. So this poem from that section goes out to that muse. And I'll conclude with this poem. Page 352, 50 Shades of Silence, Part 2, a prose poem. I am here. You are there. Somewhere out there. And between us lies 50 shades of silence. The weekend static loudly crackling on our private radio, I tune in to a movie instead. In my futile attempt to forget. But wait, which one am I watching? No, really. Screen time blurs upon my eyes. I see your face. I feel your skin upon mine. I hear your velvety voice falling like snowflakes so warm upon my hungry ears. Outside, October turns another leaf. Another leaf falls to ground this fall. Outside, the silence turns into another new shade of gray. You're driving me wild with the cacophony of your breath. The weekend neighborhood static slowly fades away. My eyelids droop into a dream. One where you are scooping me up in those rugged, manly arms of yours. And as I lie like a submissive lump of lust nestled right on your wide chest, you are gently carrying me towards the red room of desire. Tell me just this one thing. Am I dreaming you up once again? Or is this you real for once? So with that, I would like to conclude the reading. Over to you, Nami.
I now ask you, Nivedita, to offer a vote of thanks before we conclude this evening.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I just want to thank every one of you present here. Some of you already had to log off, but to them too, thank you so much. I feel absolutely blessed to have this range of people joining this book launch with me, from school day friends to college friends to fellow poets to HODs and everybody. So I'm like, and publishing manager, my go-to friend, and everybody. So thank you so much. Thank you, Namita, for doing this. You've been a lovely, lovely moderator this evening. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Ananya. Thank you, Valda. Thank you, everybody, Omlan, Mohanji, everybody who read, everybody who was present. I feel totally blessed. I feel totally loved. And also, this book is available, so you all know where to get this book. So I'm not even getting there. Just show, I hope you'll continue showing your love and affection for me as always. And with that, let's call it an evening, call it a day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for
Thank
your
you, everyone.
patience
Thanks, Neil.
and
Thanks,
being
Nami.
kind audience here. Thank you so much,
Thank
and good evening and good night to everybody.